welcome to episode 18 of the Empowered Mothers Network podcast, where we're supporting mothers to be the best version of themselves. I'm Sarah, and this episode is called The Limiting Belief of I Am Not Enough. We're going to be talking about that today. So overcoming the limiting belief of I'm not enough. Before I start, I should probably say that the podcasts go out sometimes quite a bit later than I record them. So I've not been able to record any podcast whatsoever over the summer holidays. So I'm feeling a bit rusty today. But by the time this goes out, that'll be well gone anyway. The podcast at the time of recording this is now on like Spotify, Apple, or major podcast distributors. It might be behind episode wise for a little while, for a couple of months, to the YouTube version, because I have a certain amount of bandwidth every month that I can upload a certain amount of like megabytes every month to the podcast distributor. So I've had to start with episode 8, I think it was. I've started uploading those in the last sort of week. So, you know, once I fill my bandwidth, that's probably like 3-4 episodes. So we're on 18 now. That's 10 episodes to go through. It's going to take a while to catch up. So if you want the most up-to-date ones, at the moment it's going to be on YouTube. But the older ones are all slowly creeping on like Spotify and Apple and whatnot. They're also on the website as well. They're up-to-date as well there. So admin aside, we're talking about this limiting belief today of I am not enough. I think probably it's a universal limiting belief almost that most mothers have, whether it's, you know, in one sphere of life, i.e. the sphere of parenting, not being a good enough mother, or not being a good enough partner or wife, or not being a good enough in the job role or the career or the vocation or the calling that you feel you're meant to do. So I'm going to talk a little bit today about like the understanding of this limiting belief of I am not enough, and also the impact that limiting belief sort of has. And then we'll move on a little bit to talking about how we can value ourselves and therefore start to overcome this limiting belief, or not let it really sort of run the show in our lives, and noticing the limiting belief in action, which is like the first step, and from there sort of how we can really start to overcome it. So I guess if we go firstly into looking at defining this limiting belief of I am not enough, we go straight into the language, where we've essentially internalised this belief about ourselves that whether it's all of us as a person or some part of us is just not meeting the standards. Now that might be the standards of the people around us, or that might be in many cases the standards that we hold of our own selves. So as with many limiting beliefs, it's often in childhood that these things start to arise and these situations start to arise, and we start to internalise these messages that we are either accurately or maybe not quite accurately. They might be skewed. Again, it's all subject to interpretation, but if we're internalising it as that feeling that we're not enough, then that's going to sit there in our subconscious and then peter out into our life in the future. It could also happen, I think, as well, pivotal points in your life, something like when you're a teenager as well. That's a pretty critical time in your life, and that's often a time where you can feel like you're not enough, you know, sort of when you get into like first relationships, things like that, and that's just that feeling of not being enough for the other person. So you may be at the stage at the moment where you're just curious to explore whether this is a limiting belief in your own life, that feeling of I am not enough, and it can show up in different ways. Again, as I said at the beginning, it can be something that we don't really realise is a limiting belief until we move into motherhood, and you know, you've got this situation where you've got at least one little person demanding so much from us on so many different levels of the self, that we can often, pretty much probably universally, feel in some regard that we can't give enough to the child for what the child needs. There's always going to be them points with every mum where we just feel like we've given everything we have to give and we're burnt out, and that really brings it up then to the fore if it's been kind of a limiting belief festering away in the background of that feeling of I'm not doing enough, I'm not giving enough. So yeah, it might show up as that feeling of I'm not giving or doing enough for somebody else or others in general. It might be that I don't feel like I am enough as a person, in that like there's a part of me that either is too much for some people and I need to mute it, or that there's a part of me that isn't obvious enough, isn't out there enough in the world. There's a part of me that's too subdued, too masked. Like an example would be like if you feel like you're a shy person and you feel I'm not enough because I need to be out there more, be more sociable with people, feel more comfortable in external situations, that's when we can get that limiting belief come up there. But yeah, I say the big sort of three are like the work arena, mothering children, and probably personal relationships as well, is where the three areas for me where I feel that really can come up to the surface. Now, there are different facets of how I am not enough can show up in your life. It might be that straightforward that you are at that point where you've recognised that is playing out in your head. It might be that you even have that as a kind of commentary in your head where it's probably not like saying that to the word, but something very similar, where you've got that critical voice in your head saying, you've not done well enough there, or you need to do more, or some kind of way of being criticised of yourself. And it can also show up in more subtler ways as well. So for me, I fairly recently realised that this was a limiting belief, because it showed up for me as more the phrase of what I have to offer is not enough. So this can really be kind of, if you're, say, on a path where you have either a job or a calling or a vocation, something where you're trying to go out there into the world. It might be through starting a business, or it might be through other means, but something where you're trying to get out there and you know that you have something to offer the world and you want to get out there and offer it. And there's often something holding many of us back, I think especially as women and mothers, that it is that thing of what I have to offer is not enough. So you'll see this in, for example, starting up a business. You can see this where people will want to start up a business and get going and help people, but they feel they've got to have certain certifications first, go through certain courses, and they might go through like one course and think, well, I just need another course, and it sort of builds up, and it's like, well, I don't feel quite ready yet to offer this out there, or I don't feel like I'm qualified enough, I don't feel like I'm knowledgeable enough, I don't feel like I've got enough to give. So say again, we'll keep with the business theme. If you like either have a product to sell or you have a service you offer, you might feel in some way that like it's not enough. Even if it's a physical product, you might feel like the price you're charging for it, you need to be offering more of the physical product or a greater variety. Or if you've got a service that you're offering, you feel you get quite uncomfortable about the price. What I noticed was that it wasn't just the price though of what you're charging. That can be a good indicator if you've got really low prices, and people might have said you've got low prices, or you might just feel that for whatever price you set, you need to offer more and you don't feel like you're quite offering enough. But you can also find, which is what I did, that even if you are offering something for very low price, and you know it's very low price, or even for free, that you still have that feeling come up. So, we all have sort of work to do if we are in a business about offering things and what prices we set. But I think if you've got that real blocked feeling, even if you're offering something for free, where you feel like, oh, I've not done enough for that person today, or I've not really given them a lot there, and it's currently on a free exchange basis, then there's that belief there of what I have to offer isn't enough for somebody else in some way. So obviously in the realms of business, that's then going to impact either on a financial exchange, again, as we said, so you might have difficulty setting a decent price for what you do, or undercharging, or being too kind of fearful in the first place to even set a price, and you just keep doing what you're doing for free for now, which obviously in many cases then you're going to have to take up paid work on the side to pay the bills, essentially, because you can't charge anything for what you feel called to do. Not just on a financial exchange, but on an energy exchange as well. So if you're approaching somebody and you're offering them service, for example, or maybe it's not even a service or a business, it's just you're going there and having a chat with somebody and holding space for them in some way, then if you sort of go into that feeling like what you're offering, even if you're the space holder, for example, what you're offering isn't enough in some way, you've then got that sort of lack mentality. And if you do have a customer or a client or a friend or somebody you're trying to serve, they're going to kind of pick up on that lack mentality, and then they might come away from the exchange feeling like something was lacking, and that might just only be because of that feeling of lack that you've projected out. So then I guess it's like a self-fulfilling spiral there. So you're thinking it's not enough, they're picking up on that, and then they're feeling it's not enough, and then that might be then mirrored back to you, and you think, oh, it wasn't enough, okay, I was right, and then the spiral continues. So it's kind of stepping out of that and realising when our limiting beliefs are getting in the way there, and maybe creating a self-fulfilling prophecy. So that leads us on to valuing ourselves and our sense of self-worth and our sense of confidence. So again, if we went into that situation I was just mentioning, and we didn't have that limiting belief, and we had the self-worth, and we knew what we were offering was valuable, then we could maybe go into that situation with more confidence. I've talked quite a bit about from a business career work point of view there. I think if we go back to talking about it from a mothering point of view, and the importance of really, as well as parenting children, finding that space within ourselves and our days to really cultivate that sense of self-worth. Because if we don't value ourselves, then that really does undermine our confidence. And in the realm of mothering, we if you've got young children especially, they can be full on demanding of you, and it's important to have that sense of self-worth and confidence so you can model it to them for a start, but also I think so that you can deal with the tough situations, because when we don't feel confident in ourselves and our abilities, that's when that the challenging behaviour that we are undoubtedly gonna get from kids, because they're learning and growing, is the behaviour that can kind of chip away at us. And if we're not sort of in our power and feeling confident and good sense of ourself and our self-worth, that's when it can chip away at us and push the buttons, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. It can push those buttons and those triggers of those subconscious beliefs we do have. And then we're reacting from a place of those triggers being, the buttons being pressed, the triggers going off. And that's when we'll get like shouty, angry, you know, all the kind of things that we don't really want to be towards our kids, but just come out because we've been triggered. So we've talked a bit there about, you know, noticing the limiting belief in action, and it's initially a sort of a detective game, really. To often, you know, when we're in the heat of the moment, it's hard to really zoom out and say, okay, that's happened there because of this limiting belief of feeling that I'm not enough. So a little bit of detective work needs to go on, I think. Maybe if you've got any situations or blow-ups or problems that have happened in the recent past, then if we can go back to those and kind of zoom in and look at them, or if you do start to notice a little bit more in the situations as they happen, or maybe just after it's happened, then just a bit more self-reflection and awareness. It's cultivating those so that we can be aware when these beliefs are running the show, and when we're more aware of them, we can then stand up to them in a way and say, okay, is this true? Is this really true? Am I really not enough? I've probably said this in quite a few podcasts now, but two of the best tools, I think, for cultivating this like self-reflection and awareness, and you know, just kind of, I think you do it at work, don't you, sometimes when you used to have office jobs, and you know, you carry out like reflections and evaluations of particular situations at work and how I performed and what I did, what I could have done differently and all that sort of thing. So yeah, it's kind of that basically. So two of the best tools for me to do that are definitely journaling and also practicing like mindfulness meditation. So that's just, mindfulness meditation is something ongoing that I try and cram into my day every day, just to remind my brain that it can do that and it can step back sometimes and just observe what's going on and without judgment. But journaling is definitely fantastic. I try and get as much crammed in a day as I can. If I can do twice a day, that's great. If once, okay. But that is really a useful tool, just to, you know, write down whatever you need to write down and maybe reflect on things. And sometimes just as you're writing, stuff can come up that, you know, you can't, you know, it's more subconscious, then you're letting a bit more of that come through, and stuff that you wouldn't necessarily have realised or consciously thought of can really come through there. So talking a little bit about overcoming the limiting belief of I am not enough. Again, I don't think we can say it's an all or nothing kind of thing, a black or white thing. So, you know, you've identified, okay, I have this limiting belief. Are we then going to go in gung-ho and say, right, I don't want this limiting belief, it's causing me problems in my life, so I'm getting rid of it? I don't think it's that black and white. If it was, it would probably be a hell of a lot easier, to be fair, because then the only hard work would be recognising that we have it in the first place. Whereas I think we all know, once we recognise, you know, a pattern of thinking or behaviour, it's some work to change that. And I don't think it will ever go away 100%, and I don't think it necessarily has to again. So I think in the initial stages at least, trying to, you know, obliterate it from our minds completely, so it just doesn't exist there, is probably unrealistic. The best thing I've always found to do with these kind of things at first is, one, you know, just recognise them and then kind of sit with them. And, you know, it takes a real skill to be in a situation in the middle of it and say, okay, this is coming up now, and not try and just, you know, shove that thought out of the way or stuff it down in some way, but to really sit with it and say, okay, someone's asked me how much I charge, and I've got this feeling of I'm not enough, which is running the show, and therefore I know what I want to say, but I can't because that's too much money. So I think if we just simply try and push that limiting belief out of the way, then we're just really creating space for fear to come in and run the show instead. The fears that probably have stemmed from this limiting belief. But, then we can sort of have fear come up and we'll just blurt out a figure that might be completely unrealistic. So yeah, let's not go in with the mindset of obliterating it completely, but we do want to change the mindset. We do want to be able to say that we are enough. We don't want to really go into any situation believing, internalising that we're not enough here. What we have to offer isn't enough. So a way that you might start to change the mindset, as well as observing it, is to start rewriting it as a story. So again, affirmations here can be really useful. Whatever affirmation works for you, it might be as simple as I am enough, or I have gifts and skills that are valuable to the world. What I have to offer is valuable to the world, something like that. So some kind of affirmation, again, where you can just, every time you've realised it's come in as a problem, you can then repeat your affirmations to start changing your mindset. There's also that thing of when the belief of I'm not enough is like running the show, then we will kind of tend to keep ourselves small and tucked away and not want to do things. So again, going back to the example of somebody who wants to start a business helping people because they've got gifts and they feel pushed to share them with the world, but they want to do all the certificates first and all the courses, and they're keeping themselves small and not getting out there into the world and just going and doing it. And you will see this in life. I've seen this so many times, like I've done in the past, where I felt like I needed more courses and things. And then you'll see people in other realms or whatever where they've not really qualified in anything, but they just get out there and do it. They're just like, right, I'm going to go out there and offer this as a service. Not worry about sort of getting qualified or certificates. I mean, obviously with many things, as a side note, there is a certain level of competence that we want to provide. So obviously certificates and courses to take to gain that competence are important. But it's just interesting the play of some people will just go out there and get on with it and do it, whereas some people, sort of hide behind the courses and certificates and because they don't feel that they're enough. So I think because we stay small with that belief, to overcome it, we really need to push the comfort zone and, really, really sort of go, okay, I'm open and willing to take risks now. If any opportunities come up, I'm just going to, if they feel right for me, then I'm going to go for them. And learning to be more bold, really, in our interactions with other people and in our life in general. When this limiting belief comes up, it's tending to, it's like a hurdle maybe to the next step. So that's when we've really got to really cultivate them feelings of being able to take a calculated, healthy risk and being able to feel more bold in our actions. Yeah? So if you have any stories of your own about this limiting belief, have you maybe watched this today or listened to this and thought, oh, okay, yeah, I know I can recognise that in my own life now. Whereabouts are you recognising that in your own life? Is it maybe in work or in motherhood or in relationships or everything? It's often everything. Or are you someone who's maybe already realised that and you are on the journey to rewrite that belief? If you've got any tips on how to rewrite that, then let us know in the comments below. But yeah, like I say, if you don't do a bit of journaling already, then definitely try that as a tool because it can be really useful, as can just having little daily habits, which I've blathered on about so much, and I've got a blog post, I'll have to link to that, about like micro habits and how they are so useful in really changing our lives over a grander scale, but just doing things even just for 10 minutes but on a daily basis, something like that. Just taking little action steps towards making change so that these limiting beliefs aren't running the show anymore and we can really get on with what we need to be doing as as women, as mothers, as business owners, as employees, as family members in general. So if you've got any more thoughts, let me know in the comments below or on the website if you're listening there. And I will get on with uploading a few more of the older episodes onto like Spotify and Apple and things every month as I can, so that they get, hopefully soon, in a couple of months, it'll be up to date with the latest episode being released when it's being released on YouTube. Otherwise, keep really up to date. Subscribe on YouTube for the new podcast episodes, or you can check them out on the website. If you haven't already joined the Empowered Mothers Network, you can do so on the website at empoweredmothersnetwork.com, and you can get the fortnightly journal there, which is packed full of stuff, hopefully to help you. And hopefully that is enough, and it will continue to grow. So yeah, hopefully that has made sense for everybody, and I will see you soon for the next podcast episode.